Emil's the CEO of Tomorrow Bio, and he's been hard at work at the company. And the company is a very, very important part of the longevity puzzle. With me right now, actually, on this channel are Stryker, who's our community manager. So welcome, Stryker.
Pleasure to be here.
And of course, Emil as well. Thanks for joining us, Emil.
Absolutely. Great to be here.
Cool. So, yeah, I guess we're still waiting for some people to stream on in. So we'll just kind of hang out for a few minutes, and then we'll jump into the more serious questions. Now, Emil, I understand that you are right now at the Cryonics Conference in Arizona. Is that right?
Right, yeah. I'm currently in the US and currently at a conference in Phoenix, in Scottsdale, which is the 50th anniversary conference of Alcor, one of the cryopreservation providers here.
Right. That's super cool. Yeah, I think I heard about cryopreservation many years ago, and Alcor was kind of one of the big names at the very beginning. So not a surprise that they're hosting so many of these conferences.
Yeah, absolutely. They've been around for quite a while.
Yeah, were they the first, by the way, or the first one to commercialize it, or do you know, or is it was some other companies?
Yeah, they were the first one that is still around, and so in the very beginning there were many small organizations kind of popping up here and there, and then some of them merged and became other organizations and so on. So Alco is definitely one of, if not the first, definitely one of the very first.
Right, which is impressive in many ways. I think we'll talk a little bit later about how Tomorrow Bio is a bit different and how kind of the market segments a little bit. But obviously, there's a lot of credit to be given to the person who's been here first and kind of longest.
No,
Lindy
absolutely. And we're quite good friends, right? And collaborating on a couple of topics and so on. So it's a very, it's kind of a tightened community.
Yeah, cool. And I guess as another thing we can talk about as we wait for people to trickle on in is a little bit about what Longevity DAO is. So Longevity DAO is basically a platform where we're helping, we're trying to achieve the 1,000-year lifespan. And the way that we do so is by helping, real companies doing real longevity and medical research, raise funding on our platform that can be via NFTs, like Tomorrow Bio's doing, could be ERC20s in the future. We help them reach an audience of crypto people who are into the space and raise funding. And you might not know this, but actually Tomorrow Bio, a good fraction of the funding that's raised through the NFT, more than 50% will be used on novel research for longevity, which is kind of an important, area to go into, because we want to make sure that, cryonics develops and gets kind of the new techniques and resources in that way. And Stryker, do you think it's time that we can get to the main set of questions, or should we wait a little bit more for people to come on in?
I think we can probably, start. Yeah, seems reasonable.
Okay. Cool. Again, just to reintroduce everything, I'm Seligans. With me is Stryker. We're on team Longevity DAO. I'm one of the co-founders. Stryker manages the community. And with me is our star guest, Emil Kanjora, of the CEO of Tomorrow Bio. So I think the first question that a lot of people might be curious about is, can you tell me a little bit about Tomorrow Bio? What do you guys do? Why should people subscribe to you? Why should your customers kind of use your service?
Right. Yeah. First of all, happy to be here again, and happy to give a quick introduction. So Tomorrow Bio, or Tomorrow Biostasis, how the long name is called, it's a cryopreservation company. It's a novel cryopreservation company that we set up a couple of years ago. I'm coming from the medical field, so I'm a doctor by training, but then did cancer research and built a few tech companies, always with the goal of doing something in the longevity space and being involved in the longevity space. Not to make money, but since it's a very intrinsic motivation for me. And a couple of years ago, I decided that cryopreservation is, in my mind, the most likely, or has the highest probability of giving people the chance to live as long as they would like to live. So we started Tomorrow Bio based in Berlin in Germany, and the companion or like a partner organization called the European Biostasis Foundation in Switzerland to offer high quality cryopreservation for anybody who would like to, well, who is interested in that service. And maybe really briefly to give a quick introduction what cryopreservation is in principle and how that works. It's basically a method for people who would like to live longer than currently is medical possible to, at the time of their death, so once they legally pronounce dead, then directly after we start a cool down process and then a perfusion process and a vitrification process. So long story short, a medical process that cools down the body to very, very low temperatures, to cryogenic temperatures, and then stores the body at that temperature without any degradation happening in the body, so that then this state or the body can be kept again without any further degradation or any damage accumulating until a time in the future when medical technology has advanced enough to then resuscitate and revive that patient. So then you have the opportunity, potentially, it's not a guarantee, but potentially to live on in the future. Yeah, so that's the long story short, in a nutshell, what Tomorrow Bio is. And we practically do that from A to Z. So from contracts to marketing to research to the medical teams that actually then do the cryopreservations and to long-term storage.
Yeah, that's amazing to hear. I think to re-impress upon our audience right now, it's a very important part of longevity, because while the general goal in longevity is to have treatments that stretch out your life like a rubber band so you can live 200, 300 years, from time to time, one might get an acute disease like colon cancer or something else, heart failure, where there's no acute cure just yet. And the idea is, if you are able to cryopreserve it until that cure comes, then you can kind of, stretch time to kind of get to that state of longevity. We always talk about escape velocity in longevity, where if we're able to do 1 year of life extension research in 1 year, then you can live, indefinitely. Because of that speed of research, this basically lets you short circuit the speed of the getting to escape velocity there. The next question I have is kind of what makes Tomorrow Bio different from other cryopreservation companies. As we were just talking a little bit about at the very beginning, you're at the Cryonics Conference right now. Alcor is kind of the big name out there, but they do things well for certain niches of people, but not so well for other niches. So maybe you can talk a little bit about the differentiation and what sort of people and customers are better fits for Tomorrow Bio.
Right, absolutely. So first of all, I'm very good friends with all the other cryopreservation organizations. So it's not like we're mortal enemies or anything like that. Quite the opposite. In fact, we're collaborating on a lot of topics. But I think there's a couple of advantages and that we do have, and that we will have more and more of those advantages over as time goes by. So the biggest one is that Alcor and also Cryonics Institute, which are the two at least most known players, they've been around for a very, very long time, around 50 years for each of them, right? And to their credit, they've been doing their job for 50 years, so that's all fine, but they haven't really been growing, right? So, they have been growing, but more linearly, right? So just to give you an idea, around 4,000 people worldwide currently have cryopreservation contracts. They're not cryopreserved yet, but they just have contracts that they want to be cryopreserved should they die. So this, of course, is so that there are more super yachts out there than there are people who have cryopreservation contracts. And if you want to invest in research significantly and really provide high quality cryopreservation services, you need significantly more people signed up for cryopreservation, right? So that then you can use cash flow and invest in research and develop teams, put multiple teams, medical teams, in multiple countries, and so on and so on. So I think the primary difference that we're going for our model is based on making sure that the topic of cryopreservation gets more into the mainstream. And when I say mainstream, I don't mean 50% of population, but 1 or 2 orders of magnitude more people signed up. So my goal is to get to 1 million in the next couple of years. This might take a few more years, but kind of get to a significantly larger size, right? So as opposed to other organizations, which don't have marketing teams, we have a marketing team, we have a PR team, we have a community management team, community building team, and so on and so on. So I think one of the primary differentiations is that we're actually doing a lot to grow the topic in principle, and then our membership. And then secondarily, we're investing significantly in research and development to make cryopreservation better. And then, if we have time, we can dig deeper. So there's a lot of technical differences as well, where we do a different type of preservation method that has better quality, and so on and so on, including better storage, so-called ITS storage, which means intermediate temperature storage that has higher storage quality. So there's a good amount of differences on the medical side, on the research side, and then on the organizational and scaling side.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think basically what I'm hearing is that you guys do the entire pipeline, including marketing and making sure that's really popular with people. And the marketing thing is also why we work so well with Tomorrow Bio, with Longevity DAO, because the NFT kind of helps get the word out there as well. So there's that connection. And I do want to kind of emphasize, even on my side, how important it is to kind of scale this up to drive the unit cost down and ensure the technology is great. This is kind of like one of the analogies I heard many years ago is what we have in our iPhone today in these smartphones, the components, if we were to do this as a bespoke one-time product, would cost something like $50,000. But because everyone has a smartphone, we can put all these incredibly cool gyroscopes, flat screens, batteries, and so forth for just $1,000. So economies of scale really make the process possible. And Tomorrow Bio is kind of going in this direction by having that 1 million people be cryopreserved, or sign up for that at least. We can have the research overhead necessary to have higher quality cryopreservation and drive down cost.
Right.
And the next question here is, what are you hoping to get out of issuing NFTs to the Tomorrow Bio community?
Yeah, as I briefly already said, community building is an absolute crucial and central part to our mission. This, of course, is a topic where it's a relatively small topic yet, but it's significantly growing. Like more and more people are getting interested in signing up for cryopreservation. So launching this NFT project is part of this community building effort for us. So you can kind of think of it as a ticket to an inner community of people who are really into this topic and want to be part of an inner circle, in quotation marks, of the community. So for us it's a part of our community building efforts, and then secondarily it's a path for us, or a way for us to fund more research. So as you briefly said in the very beginning, we have committed to put practically everything every dollar we'll make from this NFT sale into research or development. So 50% will go just to research, and then another part will go to development, meaning actually implementation of research findings into day-to-day practice, and so on and so on. So community building and funding important research are the two big reasons why we do this.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think, that's a great way to put it, that there's basically two sides to the equation. One is who's, minting these NFTs and buying these NFTs. They get to be part of a community, much like, modeled after a lot of these other NFTs that are around, Bored Ape Yacht Club and so forth. There are annual conferences, and this kind of opens the door to those. And then on the other side, the funding is for things that are very, deeply needed in the longevity and cryonics community. More research into better processes, development. They're all for good causes in that way, which is really great to hear. The next question, I guess, talking about these NFTs and those sort of conferences, I guess I've already leaded a little bit into that, which is, can you talk a little bit about, what you generally have for perks that the NFT holders get?
Right, absolutely. So we do a lot of community stuff, right? So we run an annual conference. So NFT holders, based on rarity, you can see it on the webpage, get access to tickets to the our events, to our conferences, to speakers dinners at the higher rarities. All expenses paid for those on us, of course. We will do more community outreach in the future for this inner circle that I briefly touched on to, with further AMAs and community updates about what the research, what's newest in research, and so on and so on. So a lot of again, think of it as like a golden ticket to the inner circle of from meetups to the conference to speakers dinners and so on. So I think it will give you unparalleled access to a very exciting topic and exciting community. And then we do have one legendary NFT, and if someone mints that one, then there's a full body cryopreservation included, paid by us. Some terms, of course, apply, right? So I mean, you need to sign some additional contracts and so on. But it gives you basically a voucher for a whole body cryopreservation. So I think it's a very exciting set of perks.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this will be kind of the premier set of NFTs for Cryonics. I don't think this actually has been done in Cryonics before. So if you like NFTs, especially if you've bought NFTs in the past, and this is even of a side interest to you, maybe Cryonics is something that's interesting. Maybe something like Longevity is kind of interesting. This would be kind of the set of NFTs to get. Both the community perks where you can actually meet up with other longevity enthusiasts. That's super awesome. And then obviously that legendary is kind of a nice kicker and a cherry on top as well.
No, and we plan to do much more in that space in the future, right? So there might be additional NFTs that we might airdrop. I'm not getting no plans, no specific plans there yet, but we might look into that. Then, of course, in the longevity community, there's a huge overlap with the blockchain and crypto community. So everybody's talking about metaverse stuff right now. So we might do something in that space in the future. I mean, of course, we're staying a cryopreservation company, right? And our core focus is on improving technology and offering the service. But we plan to do a lot of stuff in the community building side as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, I can't I can actually tease a little bit of information, but we're also working with, some companies who are thinking of adding more metaverse-like elements, game-like elements to this, and the Tomorrow Bio NFTs would be potentially an important part of this metaverse. So there is more kind of general metaverse work that could happen in this space and that we're aiming towards. And also to highlight even the base case that Emil has kind of talked about, which is that these sets of NFTs actually represent a community that will be building and growing. They're kind of associated with Tomorrow Bio, who will be getting bigger and bigger over time, or that's kind of our aim. There are a lot of other NFTs out there that are literally just JPEGs, Goblin Town, and that's totally fine. If there's just a website thrown up and some JPEGs that people buy, and then they will have kind of their own dynamics. But I think it's a special dynamic when these NFTs are tied to a situation where there's a real community that's being built, and there's a real cryopreservation company that's kind of associated with that. So the next set of questions, this one is from a user called Stefan, and he actually has a question that I'm actually very curious about myself on the scientific front, and I'm sure you've gotten this quite a few times before, Emil, which is for today, what's the best guess for when people frozen today might be reawakened? What's kind of that estimate range look like?
Right. Yeah. Very, very important question, of course. So there is no specific or no scientifically backed clear estimate yet. So it's quite difficult to answer, and everything I'm going to say to this topic is practically in the realm of speculation. So it is probably not something that will take only 10, 20, 30 or something like that years, right? So this most likely will be something that is significantly longer. So my answer to that is always that it is probably somewhere in the time frame where predictions kind of become very, very fuzzy. So somewhere in the 50 to 100-year range, maybe. It might be longer. It is possible right now to revive model animals, model organisms in a lab. Some at least, right? So they can be fully cryopreserved, and they can be taken out, and they maintain their memories and live on, and so on and so on. So from a proof of principle standpoint, there are some very early signs that this can be done in practice. It is relatively clear, at least within the community, that this should be possible in principle. But when exactly it is possible to bring someone back from cryopreservation, no good scientifically backed answer can be given here. One of the research projects or research directions that we are undertaking is to put more effort, more research, more resources in exactly that question. But for the time being, it's probably not anywhere near term. It will take a significant amount of time, but it's not yet clear how long exactly it will take.
Yeah, exactly, and that's what the research dollars will be helping go towards. And the other even kind of like framing the question point of view, there's a question of like how many years would you like to be frozen? Because the longer you're frozen, probably the more likely the medical techniques to kind of cure what ailed you will be better. So you'll be frozen in, I believe it's something on liquid nitrogen temperature, so very little year to year decay. So the longer you're frozen, in some ways, maybe better, the better. I mean, obviously for relatives and so forth, maybe there's some, a reason to kind of to want to be revived earlier. But for medical treatments, for if you have some stocks in your portfolio and you want them to go up, right? Maybe in some ways longer it could be better.
Right. So in any case, you would always wait until the underlying disease or condition or whatever it might have been that led to the patient's death in the first place is fully curable, right? So you would not bring anybody back, and the non-profit foundations who do this long-term storage, they of course are well aware of it, and it's part of their commitment that you wait until you can bring someone back, cure the whatever it might have, the disease that led to the patient's death, and then last but not least, not only these two things, but thirdly, also it needs to be possible that the patient who is being brought back, let's say they've been cryopreserved at 80 or 85 or whatever, so that at that point when they come back, that they have a significant remaining life left, right? In the future, probably people will be able to live significantly longer than it is currently possible, so that they are, they're not dying when they're being brought back from at 85 and then die again at 86 for another disease. Of course, this doesn't make much sense.
Yeah, exactly. I think, that's, I mean, I hadn't thought super hard about that, but it makes total sense, right? You want to make sure the treatments for longevity work on the current non-cryopreserved 85-year-olds for colon cancer and can extend their life by 20 plus years before actually activating it.
Right.
And related to this is one of our users is asking what age range is allowed for cryopreservation. I'm going to interpret this as if you're 18 and you have a disease, can you be cryopreserved? Is it like 80 or 90? Are there ages after which you don't want to do cryopreservation or anything like that?
No, so there's no limit at all, right? So people of any age can be cryopreserved. Doesn't matter if you're 85 or 90, or and at the end of current maximum lifespan, or if you just turn 18, right? The only difference is that, if you're younger than 18, and unfortunately also people younger than 18 die of cancer, it's of course significantly rarer, but it happens. At that point, the parents would need to sign off on it and actually do all the contractual work. But there have been people who are very young, like children, have been cryopreserved in the past. Of course, statistically speaking, most people who go into cryopreservation are significantly older, in their 60s, 70s, or 80s. But there is no limit either way.
Yeah, right. And that makes sense just on the conceptual viewpoint as well. Cryopreservation is kind of hitting the pause button on the body and, you resume it. So probably all age ranges working makes sense from that expansion as well. And the next question is from another user who is asking about, what is the integrity of these devices? Like, do they sometimes warm up and are like some cryopreservations fail in the middle due to electricity loss and things like that? Are they reliable, or can they keep that liquid nitrogen temperature for decades?
Yeah, absolutely. They're extremely reliable, and in fact, they're passive. So there's no electricity needed or anything like that, right? So even if there's an electricity outage or whatever, this would not change anything on the temperature that the patients are stored at. So the storage technology itself, it's large. They're called dewars, DEWRAR. So they're large, basically capsules and filled with liquid nitrogen, right? And liquid nitrogen naturally, without any electricity being used, has a temperature of negative 196 Celsius. So liquid nitrogen temperature, cryogenic temperature. And that temperature is just being kept by refilling this dewar, this large capsule, with more liquid nitrogen, right? And so, for example, the storage facility in Switzerland that I'm running and that Tomorrow Bio is storing its patients at has like a large bulk liquid nitrogen backup tank. We have contracts with multiple companies to refill liquid nitrogen in a very on a weekly schedule. If for whatever reason there should be a supply chain problem, then each tank individually has around 30 days of backup, and then there's the backup tank outside, like a bulk storage tank. So there's practically no danger to electricity shortages or anything like that. And in fact, the storage location is for additional security is underground. So everything you can do within reason has been done or is being done to make sure that storage is absolutely safe and sound.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, clearly a lot of thought has gone into it, as it should, because you've been very well qualified in that work on this, and a lot of other people have done as such. I think the liquid
and even
nitrogen.
more so, Oh, sorry. Yeah, even more so. So I believe that I will be cryopreserved at some point in the future as well, right? So it's not only that I think this is important to make sure that this is safe and sound and secure and high quality for everybody else, but I have a very deep personal motivation and incentive to make sure that this is safe, because I will be there at some point, with everybody else.
Right. The ultimate incentive compatibility, his life depends on it. And right. The liquid nitrogen solution is very smart in some ways, because there's so much latent heat diffusion in the evaporation of the liquid nitrogen that itself kind of stores the energy. So that's super cool. Right. And from that same person, they're kind of asking a couple other dimensions as well. So the second dimension is like, for the people who are operating on the person when they come on into the facility, how qualified and reliable are they? Do they have medical backgrounds, or what's kind of their qualification or training?
Right. So the cryopreservation, the medical teams are always led by doctors. So I'm a doctor myself. We have additional staff doctors on the team, and so on. You can't really take doctors off the rack, right? Because cryopreservation is a very specific and specialized procedure. So we do train those doctors. We also train additional support personnel to in the specific topic of cryopreservation. So they're very well trained. A lot of them have strong intrinsic motivation as well, and really are deeply into the topic of cryopreservation. So they're all high professionals and very well trained.
Yeah, that's great. So basically medical doctors with even more training than the standard medical doctor, even though, because these are not legally defined as living patients, there's no quality mandate by Switzerland or wherever that they have medical degrees. Tomorrow Bio is kind of going above and beyond by requiring that,
No,
and then the additional
absolutely.
training.
So cryopreservations in the past have been done by volunteers, right? This doesn't necessarily mean this is bad, but a medical doctor brings an additional level of understanding what is important, what needs to be preserved, and so on and so on. And then in any case, there's always the requirement of very, very extensive training. And that, of course, is then being provided by us. Yeah,
for sure. And the third question along this line was, I think you talked a little bit about model animals, and I think I've heard that embryos also get revived from cryopreservation. He's also asking a little bit about what are the working proofs thus far? What's kind of the leading edge for proofs or audits of cryopod efficiency and how and that kind of revival process?
Right. So from a scientific standpoint, there's a range of things that can be cryopreserved and can then be taken out of cryopreservation and fully work. We already touched on these model animals in a lab setting that keep their memories and so on and then live on. You can cryopreserve organs of animals. There's just here in close on the west coast of San Francisco of the US. There's a lab that does kidney cryopreservation, and then these kidneys are being retransplanted after being vitrified, after being cryopreserved. And they work again. You can show that the brain structure, the connections of the neurons in the brain are being kept after cryopreservation, and that they're intact, and so on and so on. So there's a lot of things where you can show that in principle this is something that should work. And now the research needs to be done to make this possible in humans in practice. From a standpoint about the equipment and all of that, so this is all specialized and equipment built by specialized companies. We procure most of our equipment from medical companies. So meaning all of that is highly tested, audited, and so on. Medical equipment, medical devices have a very, very high level of of scrutiny. So again, going towards those points that we are very much focused on making sure that everything is high quality, that every cryopreservation is being done state of the art, and then last but not least, that everything is safe.
Yeah, absolutely. And Emil is also doing it on himself, so he has all the right incentives.
Hopefully not anytime soon, but
that's right.
But if push comes to shove, I would be the exact procedure would need to be done on me. So it's it's very important for me that this is all above board and state of the art.
Yeah, I didn't actually know kidneys have been kind of preserved at the liquid nitrogen temperatures, which essentially is indefinite, because that's a large organ, right? It's not like some model like roundworm, which is whatever millimeters. It's like a very bulky, maybe multiple pound thing.
So they're animal kidneys, which are significantly smaller. But sure, there's a tremendous amount. It's being moved into larger into pig organs, for example. A lot of research still needs to be done, but there's a good amount of initial signs that this is something that works or will potentially work in the long-term future.
Right. The next question is actually asked by a couple of people, both Niru and Anthi, on our channels. They've actually looked through the Tomorrow Bio site, and they say that you mentioned your headquarters is in Switzerland, and there's a 45 euro per month fee. How long is this fee for, and like what does it go to? Because the Switzerland headquarters is a nonprofit.
Right. So the 45 euro is an estimation, right? And it's the same. We're launching in the US in the next couple of weeks, so it will be similar in dollars as well. So pricing basically for cryopreservation works in the following way. There's a 25 euro per month, and it will be $25 as well, most likely, membership fee that pays for keeping the team on standby and the doctors trained and all of that. Now, when someone is dying, then there needs to be the cryopreservation fee, which is 200,000 euros and up. That fee pays for the actual procedure of cryopreservation, around 80,000, and US dollars and euro is kind of the same. So whenever I say euro, US dollars would be very similar or the same. So 80,000 of that would be used for the procedure, meaning the dispatching of the medical team, the cryopreservation agent, and so on and so on. And 120,000 is being given to the non-profit foundation that uses that money to invest with around 1 to 2% return above inflation, which currently is not that easy, but in the long run, it always was easy over the last decades. To then use the return to pay for maintenance cost of cryopreservation. So, for example, buying liquid nitrogen and so on. Meaning, since the 120,000 euros is basically not being touched, only the return is being used, you can maintain cryopreservation indefinitely. So if it takes 100 years, if it takes 200 years, it doesn't really matter as long as you can get this 1 to 2% above inflation. Now, 200,000 euros, of course, is relatively expensive for some people to pay out of pocket. And it's a big pet peeve of mine that this is so expensive right now. So we're working a lot on not only making the quality better, but also reducing cost. Most people who are relatively young and would like to sign up for cryopreservation, they do pay this 25 euro membership fee, and then they pay around, and this is why the 45 comes in, an estimated around 20 euros a month. And that, of course, depends on age and existing medical history to a life insurance company. That life insurance now would pay for your cryopreservation should you die within the term of this term life insurance contract. So if anybody's interested, on our webpage, there's a long explanation on tomorrowbiostasis.com/pricing. There's a long explanation how pricing works in detail, because it's a bit, including this life insurance, it's a bit non-standard. But of course, we're more than happy to answer any questions, and our support team is always happy to walk you through everything.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think the economics need to work, and they actually, go towards a lot of these upkeep things to make sure that the operations are reliable when you need that service. The next question, I think, probably is actually one geared more towards Longevity DAO. It's from Nick Burney, and he's asking, how do we make sure that the NFT mint is random? Because we're going to be minting, a number of tokens, and then the legendary will be dropped on one of those. So the minted one. So how do we make sure it's fair? And we actually have a pretty cool process for this, which is developed by our full-time co-founder and CTO SpiceCat, who's also on the server right now, but not necessarily in the voice part. Basically, we call it ERC 721 fair. The entire idea is that we actually use a distributed randomness beacon. So, let's say some number of tokens are minted, whatever thousands of tokens are minted. After the mint ends, what will happen is that we will actually run a generation process to see which serial number gets the legendary, which ones are the epics, and which ones are rare. And they're done in a provably random way. And the way that generally we'll do it is that we're going to use a distributed randomness beacon. So Cloudflare has one where basically 10 different organizations input their random input into this pot. And the randomness is guaranteed in a clever cryptographic way where you guarantee that the random number cannot be manipulated in the sense that you would have to compromise all 10 organizations, not just 9 out of 10, not 8 out of 10, but all 10 in order to manipulate it. So if there's one honest, person in this group, and of course these are 10 named organizations, they're like MIT, things like that, not necessarily MIT, but like top organizations that are kind of vouching for this. They generate a random number, and then we use a random number and a generating process that's stable to assign the legendary epics and so forth. In fact, in order to make sure that that the process is repeatable, we've actually published a script for the generation. So you just plug in what the random seed is, and we generate which one is epic and legendary for you. And we've also containerized it, so it's in a Docker container to make sure that it's not platform dependent. So no matter whether you run it on like OS X or Linux or Windows or anything like that, you'll get the same result. So you can kind of guarantee that this process is kind of done in a fair way. So the so that's hopefully that answers a little bit of that question there. Is there anything more you'd like to add, Emil, on that?
No, I think you explained it better than I could.
Great. And the next one that Stryker just kind of posted here is the question that basically the concept of introducing NFTs is a great idea. I just want to learn more about the short, mid, and long range goals of Tomorrow Bio, and how the team is planning to involve new investors. And for investors, I imagine these are ones beyond NFT fundraising. But
Right.
Those of you might know that like Tomorrow Bio is also doing standard investor rounds as well. So how are you plan to involve new investors in the cryopreservation process?
Right. So maybe briefly initially talking about the short, long, or mid and long-term goals. So in the short term, there's a lot of low-hanging fruits in. So maybe answer this question from two parts. So in the short term, on the research and development side, there's a lot of low-hanging fruits to implement existing cryobiology or medical knowledge into cryopreservation day-to-day practice. So a lot of what I did when I was a doctor, in surgery and so on, there's a lot of stuff that is not really being used in cryopreservation. So that means how to cannulate, how to introduce the cryoprotective agent into the body by cannulation, what kind of pump equipment, what kind of heart lung machine equipment to use, and so on and so on. So in the short run, we're doing a lot of that. Right, so we're not necessarily going, full on into revival research yet, but making sure that the preservation quality of someone who is preserved with cryopreservation is better than in the past. On the other hand, as I said before, the short-term goal is definitely this community building, getting more people involved, also, of course, getting more people to sign up for cryopreservation, and so on. And for that, building local medical teams that if someone is dying, that then there's a close-by medical team to take care of them. That will also pretty much go on in the midterm, and then going more towards the long term, we will move more and more from on the R&D side, more and more from the development side into more applied research, more translational research, and then also more basic research. Basic research, for example, would be establishing the principles how to potentially revive a patient in the future. And then the other things, membership growth and adding new medical teams and training more doctors in the practice of cryopreservation, that would very much go on in the long run. And as I said before, the goal then would be to get to thousands, and then tens of thousands, and then hundreds of thousands, and then millions of members who are signed up for cryopreservation to increase quality more and more. And then practically we will not stop. Practically the plan is then always kind of have a flywheel effect where we get more members. By getting more members, more people signed up for cryopreservation, we can spend more on research to make cryopreservation better and make it more affordable. As I said, very important, that the affordability is also a very important goal. And then by that, signing up more members, because the value proposition has gotten better, and then kind of having this flywheel, more members, more research, more members, more research, have that flywheel turn. So that was the question about short, mid, and long term, and then there was a second part of the question that I'm currently blanking on.
Oh, it's basically how do you plan to involve investors into cryopreservation?
Exactly.
Which is, yeah.
Right. So we're practically a standard, limited liability company, and our US entity will be a C corp. So if anybody's interested in getting involved with Tomorrow as an investor, then people can reach out, and then we're more than happy to discuss and tell you how the investment rounds work. We brought on a lot of investors, angel investors over the last month. We're very much focused on working very, very closely with them. In fact, we do not accept investors who are just purely in it for the money, right? So they always need to have a high amount of intrinsic motivation. And in fact, we have a lot of investors who are also members with us, right? And we also had customers, members with us, who then became investors. So we're working very, very closely with our investors to to grow this topic, and make this topic more public.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I love what I hear about kind of selecting for the sort of investors that are kind of mission aligned as well. So
Very much
I
so,
do. Yeah, I do angel investment on the side. And this is kind of, it reminds me of what Elon Musk is saying about SpaceX, right? Like he doesn't want people who are just in it for the money to be investing in SpaceX, because then you'll be pushed to do these like short-term optimal things like launching rockets for, Department of Defense missions, and not really going for the end goal of going to Mars. And I guess maybe the analog here is that, Emil wants to make sure that Tomorrow Bio isn't necessarily going for something that's like on the short term will turn some revenue, but not going towards his amazing long-term vision of getting millions of people into this and making it an affordable, high-scale product that's done in a high-quality way.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's great. The next question I have here is by someone who says, Longevity Dao is dedicated to achieving 1,000 years of human life, and Tomorrow Bio helps achieve that through cryonics, which is great. This is a summary of kind of the point that we've been emphasizing. Both projects are really great. And an AMA had been done earlier here on Longevity DAO, which we did just many weeks back, where we were the subjects and we were just taking questions off of Discord. How did the partnership come to place? Who stands to benefit more from the partnership? So I'll take a shot at this first and then turn it over to Emil. Basically, I think in some ways it's a huge win-win. Like we are building a platform where we help longevity companies of all sorts, from cryonics to gene delivery to public outreach, organizations like that. And we'll be more specific later on about who those are, because we want to have a particular publicity timeline for all of those. We want to help all of those kind of raise funding, and then by having Tomorrow work with us, we can kind of build that reputation, build that publicity. So we kind of get that out of it. And Tomorrow Bio gets a win out of it in the sense that all the funding that we're getting from this NFT will be going to them, will be going to research and development, as you just heard Emil talk about. And we're actually on the Longevity DAO side kicking in kind of marketing dollars and things like that as well. So for us, from a financial point of view, all the funds go to Tomorrow Bio. And I think like the question of how, which party benefits more, that's actually doesn't figure very, very large in my calculus, because we benefit in different dimensions, and the win-win aspect of it is kind of the primary component that kind of is salient to me. The other question is how did we actually get to work together to begin with? So you would think it's like one of us reached out to the other. Like Emil's like, hey, some extra funding would be nice, or it'd be like, we want to work with Tomorrow. But it actually turns out there's this very well-known person in the crypto sphere who I would have to check with him whether he would like to be named, but who's very active, done a lot of great things for crypto, and also done lots of great things for longevity, who kind of knew both of us from the past and was like, hey, do you guys want to work with each other? And then we had that first meeting. We're like, oh, wow, this is like an exact right fit. We can provide funding non-dilutively for Tomorrow, and they and Tomorrow's kind of a company that kind of is a good fit for a bit B2C and kind of appealing directly to consumers in that way. So that's kind of a little bit of the background of how we got started, and I'll turn it over to Emil.
Yeah. I don't think there's too much to add. I mean, I don't know who benefits more. I think win-wins usually help both organizations. In our from our mindset, so we always like to work with people who don't do this longevity stuff for financial, short-term, long-term, or whatever gain, right? So in my mind, so Tomorrow is a very much a mission-driven company, right? A mission-driven organization, because part of it is even non-profit. So if it's an investor or partner or whoever, we always like to work with people who are intrinsically motivated for this topic. And as was just said, right? So all the funding goes to research, right, and development and so on, and on to our side. So I think this is very much a fit in that regard here.
Absolutely, yeah. And personally, on my front, I've been into longevity since I was a child, many decades ago. So obviously, there's a strong fundamental
Right.
drive there, and not to say, the NFTs are. The NFTs are also quite good from the crypto point of view, in the sense of the continuing support that they'll get. But from both sides, it's kind of a good match. Yeah. So the next question that's coming up here is what does Tomorrow Bio think about academic research on this front? Do they feel like in the future they might want to fund academic research on cryopreservation? Do they think that academic research has been helpful to kind of achieving their goals?
Yeah, absolutely, and we will definitely do that. So I think about research and development in kind of like a step-by-step process, right? On one hand, on the R&D side, you have this very basic research, right? Long-term, where you fundamental need to build methods and generate fundamental knowledge, right? This is usually something what academic research is doing, right? Where there's no clear path of how that can be implemented into practice yet. And then you have applied research, you have translational research, and then on the other side you have development and kind of just building the things that then can be used in day to day. So we're mostly initially, because as I said before, there are so many low-hanging fruits, we're mostly focusing on the development side of things so far. But in the long run, we will move more and more, and I already mentioned that as well, more and more into the translational, applied, and then also into basic research. So the basic research collaborations would probably be with academic institutes, with universities together. And in fact, the foundation, the nonprofit foundation that I mentioned, that I'm also running, that does the long-term storage, is already in a good amount of talks with academic institutes in Switzerland and some partly also in Germany to do that research and fund that research.
Right. So it sounds like academia does have a decent role to play in the process.
Absolutely, it does.
Yeah. And the next question is actually, this is a fun pair of questions by two different people taking a look at two different aspects of it. So one person asks, why not focus on ultra high net worth individual first? Because this is kind of the Tesla strategy, right? Like get the $200,000 Roadster or whatever that first model was they had out there. So to fund the research, and then you can get the research done, and then target a narrow population, and then that way we can make it more accessible to people as more and more people sign up. Get to the Model 3 towards the end where it's lower cost as a business strategy, and then on the opposite side, is another person who asks, Anthony, who asks, how can we make sure that, this sort of stuff is accessible to relatively poor or developing countries and things like that in the world? How do we make sure that this is accessible and not just something that in the long run is accessible to like the billionaires?
Absolutely, very, very important point. So, on the investor side, of course, we're focusing already and have been focusing on ultra high net or on high net worth individuals. On the member side, so people who want to be cryopreserved, so the 200,000 euro or US dollar price tag is kind of already, the Model S strategy. It's not necessarily a strategy, but it's a necessity. Right, just for how Tesla could not have built a Model 3 initially. It's unfortunately not yet possible for us to offer cryopreservation, high quality cryopreservation at significantly lower prices. So we're kind of unfortunately are forced to do that strategy to a degree. But I would not like to artificially increase the price because I feel like there's a strong moral obligation to offer cryopreservations for whoever would like to be cryopreserved, right? So 200,000 is kind of the, in quotation marks, at cost price. And in fact, from a cryopreservation itself, we're not earning any money, right? So the money that we're making and that pays for overhead is only this monthly membership fee. So partly we're already doing that strategy, and now the goal, of course, is, as I mentioned before, is to bring the cost down. To the second question, how can we make sure, and what are we doing to make it accessible to everybody? So there are two parts of a strategy, or three parts, in fact. So one is that we, by putting R&D dollars into making cryopreservation better, we partly also work on making it more affordable, and it's very much a focus of mine to make it accepted. So I think no one should ever not be cryopreserved because they're not able to afford it. So it should purely be a decision that people make if they want to be or they do not want to be cryopreserved. But it should never come down to money. So that's strategy number one. The second one is, there are cryopreservation organizations out there that arguably are a bit, the quality is less. Some of them only do brain only cryopreservation, so not the whole body as with us, but only the brain. Which of course in some certain scenarios, the rest of the body might be 3D printed in the future. Again, speculation, but this is in principle maybe possible. So there are organizations out there, also non-profit organizations, that do brain-only preservation at very low costs. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it if someone has the funds to get a higher quality cryopreservation, but it's probably better than nothing. So we're supporting a range of them pro bono. Whenever they have a case, we're happy to help. Down the line, we will fund research that helps that type of brain preservation and so on. And last but not least, everybody who does sign up for us, so a small amount of it's actually not that small, like some amount of the 25 euros membership fee goes to something what we call internally a hardship fund. So this is basically everybody who is affluent enough to afford everything is in quotation marks asked or / forced to pay a small amount of that 25 euros goes to this hardship fund, and this hardship fund then is there to fund cryopreservations for people who cannot afford them otherwise. So with that combined strategy, we can do something right now, and then over time get the price lower and lower to make sure that we can actually it's not prohibitive even at the highest quality for anybody.
Yeah, that makes sense. That seems like, obviously this is something you've thought about pretty carefully as well, both kind of answering that first question about, at this level, it is in some ways targeting, higher income people, but then that's kind of a necessary condition right now. And then eventually going down to making it more affordable. I think the vision or the idea of having this being like a fundamental right, just like in Europe, they see that universal healthcare is kind of like, a fundamental right, and they kind of provide that. that's kind of the long-term goal in some ways, right? Like maybe this is part of the medical system, and if you are dying of acute disease, just like the medical system in many countries and more countries are covering, this as a medical things that are medical necessities. Biostasis is also a medical necessity and kind of gets covered for people regardless of economic ability to pay.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. So I think we have a few comments here. Mick Burney sending us some great praise, which is great, saying that he, really enjoys the way that we've been presenting, and especially Emil, and being way more professional than some other organizations he's talked about. Obviously, we Tomorrow Bio is in cooperation with a number of other cryopreservation companies, but we appreciate that. On the timing front, I know that we've gotten way more questions, like actually like probably a multiple of 5x as many questions as we've gone over in the last hour. So we probably won't be able to continue indefinitely, but I want to check with everyone whether we have 10 plus ish minutes left, whether it's a hard end for you, Emil, right now, or whether you can
No,
go.
I'm all good. I can answer quicker. We can do a lightning round to get through hopefully all questions. And then if we don't get to every questions, I'm more than happy. Just message us. More than happy to answer questions afterwards if we're not able to go through everything.
Absolutely. Yeah. So again, you can DM Emil or talk to him on our general channel, which will be great because everyone can kind of hear those questions later on as well. Yeah, I can go on for a little bit too, so we'll continue. But if you want your questions in this AMA, you can kind of, if you haven't thought of them yet, you can think of them now, and then we'll be sorting through those, and then we'll go through them decently quick. This next question is actually from Stryker himself. He's kind of curious how many people are currently being cryopreserved right now. What does that history look like? You said 4,000 are subscribed to be cryopreserved, but of actual people in in these chambers, what does that look like over time?
It's about 10% of that number, so it's around 400 or so. Most of them in the US, some in Europe, and then some. There's an organization in China as well, and here and there. Around 400 are currently in cryopreservation, a bit above, if I'm not mistaken.
Right. Oh, that's super cool to know. I didn't know about China. I guess it's kind of like in some ways a culturally agnostic thing. Like this is a
very much
useful idea. Yeah. Yeah, that's super cool. And I guess like one side trivia fact for those of you in the intersection of crypto and longevity, as probably most of you are being on this channel, Hal Finney, which may or may not be part of Satoshi Nakamoto, is currently cryopreserved right now. So it's a very it's a strategy that intersects with crypto very well.
And actually he donated a good amount of money to research.
Oh, I didn't know that, but it makes sense, right?
No,
both on the altruistic and also the incentive aligned front. Yeah. I mean, I think I've spent actually some time thinking myself on why the intersection between longevity and cryopreservation and cryptocurrencies exist. And my best guess, I'm not sure what your best guess is, Emil, but my best guess right now is that all of them involve some sort of engineering, right? Like cryptocurrencies, you had to engineer all of this crypto and new math and new systems of mining and validation to secure the blockchain. And for longevity and cryopreservation, you also have to do a lot of engineering, and it requires optimism, but not futile optimism, realistic optimism that kind of came to pass. So that's kind of my best guess for why there's such intersection there, especially with Hal Finney. I'm not sure if you had any guesses or takes on that.
Yeah, I think by and large it's that. I think it's a combination of being optimistic about the future, being optimistic about that technology as a force for good, and I think to a degree also about that a lot of people in both communities are relatively good at first principle thinking, right? And so I think it's a combination of these topics that generates this relatively large overlap in interest in crypto and cryo.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and then I guess like the the first principle thinking is pretty important. Like basically, there's a idea that there's some thinking that things can be better than what currently exists, right? Like there's
Right.
for a number of people, they see what's existed in the last 10, 20 years and say, oh, the past is a predictor of the future. And then for cryptocurrencies, it's like, well, nothing like this has existed before, and suddenly we did make it exist. You kind of need that unconventional sort of thinking to kind of be
Right.
more into longevity and cryopreservation as well. The next question here is, and we can get a little bit faster for some of these. How do you intend on helping people get back to their normal lives? Say I'm cryopreserved and I need the treatment. If I am unfrozen and I get the treatment, how do I, like adjust to like 100 years of technology or 40 years of technology changing?
Yeah, so that's a very important topic. So as I said before, so around this 120,000 euros is being put aside and invested. So since we only use the return of that money to pay for maintenance of cryo storage, the principal amount, so the 120,000, will stay basically with the same purchasing power because it's inflation adjustedly invested, right? So in the future, let's say, for argument's sake, 100 years in the future, we would have the equivalent of 120,000 of 2022 purchasing power. So that amount is then being used for any cost that revival might cost, right? We might live, of course, in a post-scarcity society at that point, where maybe revival cost is negligible and, actually society would easily pay for it, but, you can't really be sure about that. So let's say it's not the case. So then this 120,000 would be used for that. And it would be used for paying for, in quotation marks, reintegration into the new society, right? So that might entail, retraining people, getting them up to speed with newest technology, and so on, whatever it might require. And of course, I'm not sure what will be needed in 100 years from the future, but that is the plan, how that money is being spent, being kept with a non-profit foundation. And part of the non-profit foundation's purpose is to do just that: reintegrate, revive people, and then reintegrate them into long-term society, apart from the primary goal, which is, of course, keeping them safe and sound in storage.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. So it sounds like this is back to the ecosystem view of Tomorrow Bio, that they kind of take care of that entire ecosystem to make sure the entire A to Z is taken care of for the entire process. Similar to this, this person asks if the brain has been basically unstimulated for 40 years or 100 years, would it go into shock if it gets revived? And I think maybe tagging on to that is is there substantial aging going on even at liquid nitrogen levels? Like, does the thing change, freeze dry over the period of years or anything like that?
Right. So to answer the second question first, no, there is no aging going on while at cryogenic temperatures. So in principle, of course, some atoms still move a bit or wiggle a bit, but not aging in the sense of the term. The reason for that is that metabolic activity, metabolic speed, which is one of the most important factors why we age, except for environmental factors. Environmental factors are all negligible at cryogenic temperatures, and the metabolic activity, it's so much reduced that around 1 minute of metabolic activity at normal temperature is equivalent to thousands and thousands of years of metabolic activity at cryogenic temperatures. So practically, for all intents and purposes, there is no aging going on. And to the second question, if there's some kind of shock or how the brain would adapt to being revived, again, here we are in the realm of speculation, of course, or educated guessing maybe. Most likely, that's not going to be an issue, right? So the brain, it's kind of like a very deep sleep or general anesthesia. The brain activity is basically paused. Now, whatever the revival technology or revival method would be, there would need to be maybe some nanotechnology to be employed for that, and whatever it might be. But most likely, if you employ that, there is no shock or anything like that. And of course, that would be done with all the prudence of a medical procedure in the future to make sure that that wouldn't happen.
Yeah, that makes sense. So there's a lot of care and thought having been put into that. And on the basically negligible passage of time, I'm actually kind of reminded of like college chemistry. There's like some Arrhenius equation, right? Basically every 10 degrees
That's exactly
centigrade
it,
you
yeah.
go down,
Yeah.
it's 10 times slower. So at 170, that's like, 10 to the power of 5 or whatever, at 9 slower. So yeah,
It's crazy. It's crazy slow. It's absolutely negligible.
yeah. So yeah, basically it's totally at a
It's
standstill,
stopped.
which is
For all intents and purposes, it's paused.
yeah. Just I guess amazing result of just physical chemistry and so forth. So
Right.
yeah, I think there's one final question that we have to kind of close out the AMA, which has been wonderful, is and I guess I'll turn it to Emil first, and I'll try to give a version of the answer to this. Is what's the main message you hope that listeners take away from this NFT launch?
Yeah. So I think that the core message is that this is an exciting topic, right? This is something that if you're interested in the topic, then I think it makes total sense to join the community, right? Join the community via an NFT, right? With all the perks as we discussed before, to really be part of this, in quotation marks, inner circle. I think it's a very meaningful mission to offer cryopreservation, and we'd be more than happy to have you on board as one of our community members. So join us and help make this thing work and make it an option for anybody who would like to choose so.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a very motivating vision. So yeah, I think if you're very much interested in this space, in longevity, in cryonics, this is kind of the perfect match. And what I like to add to that is that I think there's this, obviously, if you're in the intersection of NFTs or crypto, and then also cryogenics or longevity, this is definitely the thing for you. Like you have to, and obviously multiple mints, right? Like would kind of be the ideal. However, I also would like to make the pitch for the union of these two sets too, not just the intersection. So if you are into longevity and cryonics and not so much into NFTs or crypto, I urge you to learn a little bit about it, learn a bit about the community building that has happened with this. And you can even think of it if you're more used to, even though NFTs are something more stable, if you're more used to, just giving funds and so forth, you can frame it in that point of view too. So I encourage you to kind of think of it from that point of view. And obviously, if you're just into crypto and marginally into longevity and so forth, you take some supplements and so forth. I think even on just a pure NFT basis, this is a great NFT in the sense that you do get really cool art. So if you haven't seen the art before, you should go to our website, which will drop in the general link afterwards, or the official links channel afterwards. You can see the sort of sneak peek of art that our great team is kind of coming up with. There's great art, but there's also all this community stuff. There's that free cryopreservation included in the legendary, and also continued effort on Tomorrow Bio's part as a growing company. So even on the NFT front, I think it's kind of amazing as a standalone. So I kind of encourage you to think of it that way. In any case, I know that Emil is a very busy man. He actually just jumped off one panel from in Arizona to make this, and I'm sure he has a bunch more to go to. But if you have more questions, feel free to DM him, ask him those questions in general. You can @, him, or he also has that standard contact page on the Tomorrow Bio website. If you are an accredited investor or an otherwise investor that invests in these sorts of companies, feel free to reach out to him. He is doing a raise on that front as well. That's more or less it on my side. Any further words from Stryker or Emil or anyone else around?
Nothing from me.
Yeah. So, sorry. Yeah, I'm also happy to have answered all the questions. Happy to have joined, and thanks for organizing. And more than happy to stay in contact with everybody and keep the conversation going.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, thank you again for joining us, and we'll talk to you in the future, and then we'll follow up in the general channel then. All right, thanks everyone.
Perfect. Thanks.
All right,
Talk soon.
see you.